No one told me that working at a bookstore could ruin my sense of reality. Or maybe it wasn't the books, it was the ghost. Either way, when he first called me by a name I didn't even know belonged to me, I laughed in his face. And then, just like that, I wasn't sure if I was laughing anymore. The bookstore sat on the corner of Maple and Fifth, right in the heart of a town that had stopped pretending to grow decades ago. Every shelf leaned like a tired old man. Every book carried the smell of rain-soaked paper, and the walls seemed to sigh whenever a customer pushed open the door. For most people, it was a place to wander into when the world outside felt too fast. For me, it was just a job, $10 an hour, no insurance, and the faint hope that burying myself in novels would keep me from thinking too much about the things I wanted but could never say out loud. That was before he appeared. At first, I thought the photograph was a prank. Wedged between 2 volumes of poetry by Whitman, there it was, a black and white snapshot of 2 young men, maybe in their early 20s, caught in a candid moment. One of them looked suspiciously like Mesame crooked smile, same restless eyes. The other? A stranger, but not really. The kind of face that instantly belonged somewhere deep in your chest, as though you'd spent a lifetime memorizing it. That night I dreamt of him, and the next morning he walked right into the bookstore. His presence was wrong in all the ways that made my heart race. His clothes were out of time-faded suspenders, a button-up shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, shoes scuffed but polished. He looked like he'd stepped out of a year that the rest of us had forgotten. His skin held the kind of glow you only saw in old film photographs, and when he spoke, his voice bent the air around him. "Eli," he said. My name wasn't Eli. But in that moment I wasn't sure anymore. I told myself he was just some eccentric customer. But the way he looked at me like he was reaching through decades to touch something fragile made me forget every rational excuse. And then he said the words that should have made me walk away but instead tied me to him like a chain. "You promised me forever." I should have been terrified. Hell, maybe I was. But curiosity can be a crueler master than fear. Over the next week, he appeared again and again, always in the same quiet hours, always with the same bittersweet smile. I learned his name was Daniel, though he never gave a last name. And every time he said mine, Eli, it cracked something inside me that I hadn't realized was hollow. "You don't remember," he whispered once, when the store was empty and dusk was melting into the windows. "But your soul does." I wanted to tell him he was insane. Instead, I found myself leaning against the counter, asking him questions I had no business asking. "When did we meet? What did I say to you? How did it end?" His answers were fragmented, like torn pages of a diary. Dances under street lamps, stolen kisses between bookshelves, the promise of love that defied the world's cruelty. And the photograph, always the photograph. He claimed it was proof that once we were 2 boys in love in a time that wanted us invisible. He claimed I was the same, reborn but still his. Ridiculous, right? Except every time he looked at me, something in my chest lurched toward him like a compass needle snapping north. Life outside the bookstore was less forgiving. I lived with my mother, who believed in church more than she believed in me. At 22, I had perfected the art of silence, dodging questions about girlfriends, pasting on smiles that made me small enough to pass unnoticed. The town wasn't cruel in loud ways, but in whispers, in looks, in the kind of silence that stretched until you learned to fold yourself into it. So maybe that's why I didn't push him away. Daniel was impossible, but he was also the first person who ever looked at me without expecting me to disappear. One evening, he touched my hand. It wasn't solid, more like static, more like the memory of touch than the thing itself. But it was enough. I gasped, and he smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt less alone in a world that had always made me feel like a shadow. "Why me?" I asked him once, when the ache of not knowing began to claw at me. "Why are you here?" His answer was both terrifying and tender. "Because you loved me enough to come back, and I loved you too much to let go." I wanted to call it madness. Instead, I went home that night and stared at the ceiling until dawn, whispering his words like a confession. It didn't take long for people to notice. My coworker, Jenna, teased me about talking to myself in the stacks. Customers glanced at me like I'd lost it, and maybe I had. But every time Daniel appeared, the world outside blurred, and it was just us two boys tangled between what was real and what was remembered. The danger was, I started to believe him. And belief is a dangerous thing in a town that doesn't forgive boys like me. By the end of that first month, I was a ghost in my own skin. I laughed less, worked more, lived only for the hours Daniel came to me. He told me stories of the past, how we'd met in this very store when it was new, how the owner at the time pretended not to see us holding hands, how one night we swore beneath the stars that nothing could separate us. Nothing except death. He never told me how he died. And I never asked. Some truths are too sharp to touch until you're ready. But one evening, when he leaned close and whispered that he remembered the way my lips tasted of fear and hope, I almost broke. Because how do you miss something you've never lived? Or maybe I had. Maybe some part of me always had. Daniel's presence grew heavier, like the weight of a memory pressing down on every waking moment. The bookstore wasn't just a job, Anna Maria, it was a stage where past and present collided, where I lived two lives, the boy who shelved paperbacks and the boy who once belonged to Daniel. But the world outside was unkind. One night, I came home late and my mother was waiting at the kitchen table, Bible open in front of her like a shield. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her silence filled every corner of the room. "You've been different," she said finally, her voice sharp in its quietness. "People talk. They say you're distracted, talking to yourself, laughing at shadows." I swallowed hard, pulse racing. If I told her the truth, she would call a priest. Or worse. "I'm fine," I lied. Her eyes narrowed. "You're not fine. And I won't have this house cursed by whatever it is you're doing." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that I had finally found someone who saw me, who loved me in a way no one else ever could. But the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. So I walked upstairs and shut the door before she could see the tears sliding down my face. The next day, Daniel noticed. "You're pulling away from me?" he said softly, standing in the poetry aisle, where the shadows wrapped around him like a secret. "They think I'm crazy," I whispered. "Do you believe them?" His voice cracked, and for the first time I realized he was afraid. I shook my head, too quickly, too desperately. "I don't know what I believe. You feel real, but how can you be?" His expression was pure anguish. "Because love is the only thing that survives. Because I've waited decades for you to come back to me." And then, before I could answer, he leaned forward, lips almost brushing mine. For the briefest second, I swore I felt him warmth, breath, life, and just as quickly he was gone. After that, he didn't return for days. The bookstore felt hollow without him. I drifted through shifts, stacking books I didn't care about, waiting for his shadow, his smile, his impossible presence. But nothing came, until the night the photograph disappeared. I found the gap in the shelf where it had always been, empty now like a wound. My chest constricted, panic clawing at me. The photo was the only proof, the only tether between his world and mine. Without it, he was nothing more than a fever dream. That's when Jenna found me. She had been my coworker long enough to notice things most people ignored. "You're looking for something," she said. I froze. "It's nothing." But she tilted her head, studying me the way only a friend could. "It's him, isn't it? The boy in the picture." The air left my lungs. "You've seen it." "Of course I have. Everyone has. You think you're the only one haunted in this place." My heart hammered. "You means real?" Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "Real enough. That photograph has been here longer than the both of us. People say the boy in suspenders died in a fire down the street in 1947. The other boy, no one knows what happened to him." Her eyes met mine. "But I guess you do." That night I dreamed again. But this time it wasn't a dream. Flames roared around me, the heat searing, smoke clawing at my lungs. Daniel was there, reaching for me through the fire, eyes wide with terror. And then collapse, darkness, the weight of goodbye. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, Daniel's name on my lips. And when I stumbled into the bookstore the next morning, there he was. Not smiling, not soft, just broken. "You remember," he whispered. I did. I remembered running into that fire, swearing I'd never let go of his hand. I remembered failing. I remembered his scream as the world ended around us. And now, here we were, in another life, carrying scars we couldn't see. "Why me?" I asked again, voice trembling. "Why do I get another chance?" Daniel's eyes glistened. "Because love doesn't die, Eli. It waits. It fights. It refuses to vanish, even when the world tries to burn it away." I reached for him, desperate, reckless, and for the first time, my hand didn't pass through air. For the first time, I felt skin against skin. And then the bookstore lights flickered. The next days were chaos. The town whispered louder. My mother prayed harder. Jenna warned me that ghosts never stay forever. And Daniel? Daniel grew weaker, like the tether between us was fraying. One evening, as the sun bled gold through the windows, he sat across from me at the counter, his eyes heavy with something final. "They won't let me stay," he said. "No," my voice broke. "You can't leave me again." His smile was sad but tender. "You already lost me once. But this time you get to live. You get to love without hiding. Promise me you won't waste it." I shook my head violently, tears streaming. "I don't want anyone else. I want you." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine. The warmth of him was fading even as I clung tighter. "Then carry me," he whispered. "Carry us. Every time you love without fear, you keep me alive." And then, like breath on glass, he was gone. Grief is not loud. It's the silence after. It's the space he no longer filled, the absence heavier than his presence ever was. For weeks, I wandered the bookstore, hoping, praying. But Daniel didn't return. The photograph was gone. The shelves sighed their tired old sighs, and I was alone again. Except I wasn't, because something had shifted. Jenna's knowing glances turned into quiet support. Customers smiled at me like I mattered. And one evening, when I sat at the counter, watching the sun spill over Maple Street, I realized my chest no longer ached in the same way. Love hadn't vanished. It had changed. And when I closed my eyes, I could still feel Daniel's hand in mine, still hear his voice urging me to live. Months later, I pinned a new photograph to the poetry shelf. Not black and white, not faded. A Polaroid Jenna had snapped of me, laughing for once without shame. Beneath it, I scrawled a line of Whitman. "We were together. I forget the rest." And maybe that was the truth of it. Daniel was gone, but he wasn't. And as I stood in the golden light of that quiet bookstore, I knew this much. I would carry him with me, into every kiss I dared to give, every hand I dared to hold, every future that once felt impossible. Because love, even haunted, was still mine. The world outside hadn't changed. The town still whispered. My mother still prayed. But inside me, something fierce had awakened. I wasn't Eli, not really. I wasn't the boy in the old photograph. I was male-live, breathing, aching, hoping. And Daniel's love, impossible as it was, had taught me the one truth I had spent my life running from. That I deserved to be seen. That I deserved to be loved. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.